Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw. Sean Liang, my co-host, is out today, but I am joined by a good friend of mine and a podcaster in his own right, host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mike White.
Hey there. Thanks for having me back on, Chris.
Any day, anytime, you just name it. Name the movie as long as it's, as long as it's not a Michael Bay movie, and we'll watch it. As long as it's not a Michael Bay movie or Bryan Singer movie, we can get through it. Late Bryan Singer, not early Bryan Singer, because he made like one good movie and then everything else has been kind of bad.
You're talking about Apt Pupil, of course.
I'm talking about Usual Suspects.
Duh. Okay.
No, I've seen Usual Suspects one time and I was like, okay,
yeah, this
is a movie. I don't understand the hype.
Kind of over-directed.
Yeah, well, and the whole movie is predicated on the twist, and the twist is like not that exciting. I didn't think. I knew the twist going into the movie, so maybe it was just ruined for me outright. I don't know. But we're not here today to talk Bryan Singer. We are here today to talk the final film of our Werner Herzog retrospective, and it is Aguirre, The Wrath of God. It is Werner Herzog's first collaboration with Klaus Kinski, one of his 5 collaborations with Klaus Kinski. But before we talk about that film, Mike, have you been watching anything this week?
Oh, boy, have I ever. I have been watching movies about men who like to sleep with women who are asleep. I've been watching the Sleeping Beauty films. So one called The Sleeping Beauty from Australia from a few years back. One called House of Sleeping Beauties from a few years after that, which was based, both of those kind of had a basis in the Japanese novel of that name. And then I even watched a Disney documentary called Waking Sleeping Beauty, which was about how Disney kind of turned itself around in the 80s and 90s. Had nothing to do with Sleeping Beauty, really, but I kind of got tricked by the title and ended up seeing a really enjoyable documentary.
I was going to say, isn't one of those films has the lead from
Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch, right.
Yes.
Yeah. I won't say how I've seen pictures from that movie, but I have. I won't say how, but I was always disturbed by the pictures that I saw. So I was like, I don't know what's going on here.
Pleasant of a film. Yeah, it's not something you want to sit down with your parents and watch.
I watched Clerks 2 with my parents in theaters, so I don't know how that compares disturbing level to that. But the premise of these films are men just sleeping with women that are asleep for sexual pleasure, or?
Well, they specifically are told not to have sex with the girls, but there is definitely a level of somnophilia there. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm doing a podcast this week on a film from '73 called Some Call It Loving, and there's kind of a Sleeping Beauty angle to it. So I'm watching all these other sleeping films and just checking it out, how men are scared of women, so if they're asleep, it's a little less scary, and that seems to be the premise of both of those other films.
That's an interesting premise. I honestly, it's intriguing. It just sounds a little upsetting. It's quite upsetting.
I won't disagree.
Are they good movies at least?
Some call it Loving is good, but the other two, the Sleeping Beauty ends a little oddly for me. It was produced by Jane Campion, so it kind of has that Campion feel to it. And House of Sleeping Beauties, after 45 minutes, I ended up turning it off. I was just like, yeah, I can't handle this, because that was from the man's point of view, and he just seemed to be wanting to take advantage of these women that he was sleeping with, and it was kind of gross.
Yeah. It sounds like such a, not niche thing, but it just sounds, I guess I don't know who the film would appeal to, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's the real question, right?
Yeah. I guess I should probably go back and read the original novel that it was based on and see where these things are coming from. I found it interesting that one film is from the female's point of view and the other is from the male point of view, but still you're kind of robbing the woman of any power, obviously, by putting her asleep. At one point, she finally has the power of sight. She has a camera that she sets up and sees one of these sessions. But then that's pretty upsetting because the guy who was sleeping with her, spoiler alert, this is the end of the movie, he ends up like ODing and just lays down next to her and dies. So she just sleeps next to this dead guy for an evening. Fun stuff.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You guys do talk about pleasant movies over at the Projection.
Sometimes, yeah.
From time to time.
Every once in a while. We'll break out the fun stuff. So, we just talked about Apocalypse Now, so that one's coming out soon. That's a pretty pleasant movie.
Yeah, that's yes. I don't know if the word I would use pleasant. I don't know if I would use the word pleasant for Apocalypse Now.
There is a real theme going through a lot of the films this summer of fairy tales. So looking at things like Some Call It Loving, and then Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, Celine and Julie Go Boating. So,
which I will be on.
Yes. So there's a lot of and then even later in the year when we do Umbrellas of Cherbourg, there's kind of a fairy tale aspect to a lot of these films that we're talking about.
Gotcha. It sounds interesting. I'll have to listen to it and see. I'm curious what your guests are going to say. I know what you're going to say because you kind of spoiled it a little bit, but I'm curious. Your guests are probably just like, what the fuck are you making me watch? Like, what the fuck is this? Oh, God. I'm trying to think. Did I watch anything this week? Watched X-Men Apocalypse, but I'm going to be talking about that later. I was watching some documentaries on Netflix, so that's that. I was watching those CNN did original documentaries on the 60s and the 70s.
Okay.
And I was watching those. Are pretty good. I was actually really impressed. I thought it was going to be pretty heavy on the fluff, but it was actually pretty good. It's got Tom Hanks and Mark Goetzman as the producers, and they do a lot of the producing for those HBO films like Recount and Game Change. So it was actually really good. And they talk about the Talking Heads at one point. So
nice.
Kind of, yeah. They talk about the prog rock movement in literally the last 5 minutes of the final part of the final documentary, of the 70s part. So I was like, all right, David Byrne, cool. I haven't really watched anything though. It's been a busy week. Let's talk about Aguirre, because I'm actually really excited to talk about this movie. Because, and I'll talk about why after I talk about the synopsis for the film, but I was super excited to get to watch this movie again. The film was directed by Werner Herzog. It came out in 1972. The original title is German. It's Aguirre der Zorngott, which translated is The Wrath of God. Stars Klaus Kinski, as I mentioned, and there are some other people in the film as well. But it's Werner Herzog using the film as a vehicle for Klaus Kinski, obviously. The IMDb synopsis for the film is: in the 16th century, the ruthless and insane Don Lope de Aguirre leads a Spanish expedition in search of El Dorado.
Following the conquest of Peru, a few Spanish adventurers undertake the boldest mission of their lives: With 1,100 men, 2 women, captive Indians, and animals, they descend from the Andes down into the steaming primeval forests, where the waters of the Amazon begin, in quest of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold. But the forest swallows them up. Its secret is preserved.
What's all the trouble about? Do you know, Ines?
You shouldn't ask. It's your father.
If I, Aguirre, want the birds to drop dead from the trees, and the birds will drop dead from the trees. I'm the wrath of God.
Aguirre, I know exactly what you intend to do to Ursua. Every last detail. And God will punish you for it.
Get out of my way! Run! Keep him! Keep him in front! I want all the men forward! Get away from that fool! Look for Indians! Go! Fire! Set fire to the village!
Mike, quick take on the film. Had you seen it before, and kind of what are your thoughts?
I want to say that I saw this one in the early, mid-90s. I was going through a little bit of a Herzog phase, and for some reason I was mixing up this and Fitzcarraldo in my head. It was probably all the jungle and plus the megalomania of Klaus Kinski, and I had forgotten just how Kinski's kind of in the background when Aguirre starts and kind of moves more into the foreground until he's dead center in the frame, literally, as the movie goes on. And, yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. And then, I don't know, I imagine you did the same thing. Did you watch My Best Fiend to kind of go along with this?
I watched some of it, but I had a hell of a time finding My Best Fiend. I couldn't find it at any store when I was in Lincoln. Then again, that's because the only store to buy movies is Best Buy. So good luck buying something that isn't a Michael Bay movie. So I found like clips sparingly on the internet, but I had a real hard time even finding anything. I think there was a copy of it on YouTube, but it was such a poor quality copy. I could never find it. So I saw just bits and pieces, and I talked to some people who had watched it and kind of grilled them about it. So
I would say it's definitely necessary viewing to watch both of them, but, you know, you probably have the gist, and I'm curious to know your take, having not seen My Best Fiend, so it'll be an interesting discussion. So
I saw this movie, and I'm not making this up, I saw this movie when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
My grandfather was a Ukrainian immigrant who came to the United States right after World War II. And he had a very eclectic taste in movies, and that's probably where I get my eclectic taste from. I mean, I remember when I was, like I said, 7, 8, 9, I saw Predator, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Aguirre, Commando, Total Recall. I mean, these were all movies that he showed me that I can guarantee my parents were not down with. They also went to the movie store together. We rented Dogma and watched it. So, I mean, I remember parts of Aguirre, but I was really excited to get to watch it again because I had, good memories of the movie, but obviously, I mean, I was 7 years old. I'm not going to understand the movie, and I'm 26 now. I understand it, but, it's a Herzog film, so there's layers upon layers upon layers of subtext and, meaning to things that maybe you wouldn't even think matter. But of the Klaus Kinski Herzog films that we watched this month, and so we watched, for the Kulturecast, we watched Fitzcarraldo, Aguirre, and Cobra Verde. We didn't watch Nosferatu the Vampire, but I've seen it. That was one of the first movies I watched when I started the site, and I have never seen Wojciech. Of the ones that I've seen this month, and just in general, Aguirre strikes me as, I wouldn't say my favorite, but it's the most reined in Klaus Kinski performance of the 4 films. Nosferatu, as much as I like that movie, I think that movie could have existed without Klaus Kinski and been perfectly fine. He's kind of relegated. He's not relegated to the background, but it doesn't feel like the typical Klaus Kinski performance, which is fine. I mean, it allows him to kind of grow as an actor. Cobra Verde is just Klaus Kinski absolutely fucking unhinged, which I really enjoyed about that movie, and I feel like that movie gets kind of overlooked for films like Aguirre and Fitzcarraldo, because, Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, I think, are the kind of the movies when anyone who's kind of, they know of Herzog, but they're not really into Herzog, they're like Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, and that's kind of their, or Grizzly Man, or Grizzly Man. That's all I've seen is Grizzly Man. I feel like that's kind of most, kind of middle of the road film goers. That's kind of their base knowledge films are Aguirre and Fitzcarraldo. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, that seems to be like, going back to the video store kind of thing. If there was a Herzog section, or you were going to find a Herzog film, it would be one of the two or both. You weren't necessarily going to see The Enigma of Caspar Hauser or Strozak or any of those kind of things until... Which
are great films in their own right.
Right. And it wasn't until, some of the later documentaries that, he had so many great documentaries and so many great films, but it wasn't until, you're getting around like Grizzly Man and Rescue Dawn until people started to finally click like, oh, wow, this guy's a really great filmmaker, and he seemed to break through into the mainstream. But before that, it seemed more like if you're into film, then you know Herzog and you know these other movies.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the thing is like, you're completely right. Herzog was kind of this, not club, but it was like an art house indie film kind of, you had some art house indie film cred if you knew who Herzog was. And, you were kind of like, Fitzcarraldo or Strozak or, like you said, The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, like, oh shit, like about movies. And I kind of still feel that way to some extent, like not trying to like play it up, but if I said, Fitzcarraldo to someone who I know enjoys movies or Werner Herzog, they'll be like, Grizzly Man. But like, the Aguirre specifically, it is, I think, also his most, which is really surprising to think about, it's his most westernized film that he's made, and it was his first collaboration with Klaus Kinski. I mean, the whole film, at least the version that I watched, was dubbed in English, but they were also speaking English in the film. I mean, I was watching their mouths and they were speaking English, so it wasn't like they were speaking German in pretty much every other feature-length film I've seen of Herzog's.
I watched either German language or German dubbed. I didn't really pay attention to their mouths, but I watched a German language version of it that was subtitled in English.
Okay, so maybe, I was watching their mouths and it seemed like it was syncing up, so maybe it was just some characters speaking English and Klaus Kinski speaking his very hard, aggressive German, which, to be fair, if you're watching this film in English, you're losing half of the performance of Klaus Kinski. At least I feel that way, having seen him in Cobra Verde and Fitzcarraldo.
Well, I did watch the trailer, and I was watching his mouth quite a bit, because the trailer that I found on YouTube was dubbed in English, or is English language, I should say. And, watching his mouth, I was just like, was he speaking English this whole time? Did I watch something that was dubbed back into German? So, color me confused about that whole thing.
Right. Well, and he speaks English in Fitzcarraldo as well, but he also speaks German, and there's also a lot of tribal dialect when they're speaking with the Amazonian tribesmen that help them pull the steamboat over the mountain. And this weird quandary with foreign language films, where I feel like personally, and someone like yourself who watches a lot of movies, and do you feel like when a film is English dubbed over the original language without subtitles, do you feel like it loses something of the film?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can have terrific voice performers go in and redub everything, but I would rather hear what they were saying. As long as it was the director's intention for us to be hearing that original language, if it was shot with people speaking German and the director wanted us to hear people speaking German, then I want to hear people speaking German. When it comes to like the spaghetti westerns or some of the Hong Kong films where everything is done post anyway, then I'm kind of okay with hearing people being dubbed, some of the Italian actors who were speaking Italian on screen or on set, and then they're dubbed into English, but then our main characters, like a Clint Eastwood, dubs himself. Then I'm okay with something being English dubbed, of course. But, I would rather hear what the director intended. Right.
No, I completely agree. And, having seen Klaus Kinski in a film like Cobra Verde, where it's all in German, there's something so mesmerizing about his staccato voice and the way he delivers his lines that it's mesmerizing. And I think some of that is lost when he's speaking English. Not that you can't understand him. I mean, if he's speaking English in Aguirre, which it does lose some of that, I don't know, that the power that I felt from his other performances. Mm-hmm. But he's fantastic in the film. I don't know if Klaus Kinski working with Werner Herzog, unless Wojciech is a terrible movie, I don't think any of their films together are anything less than some of the best films, like some of the best auteur films that I've seen, where you understand and get who Herzog is through his films, and it's just, they feel so, Herzogian. I mean, Jesus, you can't, it's just, the auteur style of Herzog comes through so glaringly in his films, and his work with Klaus Kinski, as much as I like Stoyczek and The Enigma of Caspar Hauser, I think that his work with Klaus Kinski are still his best films. Mm-hmm. His documentaries aside, I haven't seen Rescue Dawn, but honestly, it's not a movie that I'm chomping at the bit to go see.
Well, he can definitely get some great performances out of people. Even when you look at something like, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, he gets one of Nicolas Cage's best performances out of him that he's done in a long time. So he definitely knows how to direct actors. But I will completely agree that when it comes to his collaboration with Kinski, it was like those great moments of a Scorsese with a De Niro, or going back to a Leone with a Clint Eastwood, where you knew that they were kind of working together, and they might have been working against one another. And that was one of the great things about Herzog and Kinski, was that kind of, grabbing you by the throat type relationship that they had with one another, but yet they were still able to bring out these terrific products in the end, these wonderful stories with these great performances. And it seemed like Herzog was one of the few people to know how to tame Kinski, or at least how to deal with his explosive nature, and then be able to get these performances out of him. So, because I know I've talked with other people, like I talked with David Schmoller years ago, and I think he had a short film called Please Kill Klaus Kinski or something like that, where it was just like talking about how Klaus Kinski basically ruined one of the films that he did because of his antics and just how crazy he is. But Herzog seemed to be the guy who could get those great performances, because we all know, and I don't think I'm out of line by saying that Kinski made a lot of films, and a lot of them were shit. It was just like the rare film where he was, running on all cylinders, and fortunately all of the Herzog films seem to be those ones where he was running on all cylinders.
Right, and, you mentioned Herzog being able to rein in Klaus Kinski. I think also Herzog was one of the few people who maybe tolerated him as well. I mean, most directors probably don't have the patience that Werner Herzog does. Right. And Werner Herzog seems like he has, the patience of, the patience of an absolute, professional. Getting to the point where they're at each other's throats and they're, willing to kill each other, which they talk about in My Best Fiend. Because Herzog threatened to kill Klaus Kinski? Or is it the other way around?
Yes, I believe it was both. Because there was one point where Kinski was talking about walking off of the film, and Herzog said, listen, I have a rifle that has, I think it was like 9 bullets or something, and he said 8 of them are going to be in you, and then the last one is going to be in my brain. So it was like, yeah. So he definitely, there was definitely some contention with that relationship.
Well, and, it sounds like Herzog himself sounds like, it's pretty obvious that Herzog himself is a very eccentric gentleman. Yes. I would say that that's a nice way of putting it. And some of the best artists are eccentric. Most of the best artists are eccentric. And that really comes through with this film, looking at a film like Fitzcarraldo, and then you look at a film like Aguirre, and this is something I've kind of been seeing throughout his feature-length films. His feature-length films don't feel like films. They feel almost like goddamn documentaries. Yeah. I mean, even Aguirre feels like a documentary. It's like Herzog somehow managed to go back in time and film them while this is happening. The sense of place that Herzog is able to establish with this film and Fitzcarraldo is really unlike most directors are able to. And I don't know if that's just the way the Amazonian jungle kind of lends itself to being shot, or what it is, but I mean, the sense of place that Herzog is able to establish with this film and most of his films, they feel like documentaries, they don't feel like feature-length films.
I underwent a very interesting experience as I was watching Aguirre yesterday again, and because when it opens with an absolutely gorgeous shot, and Herzog talks about it in the My Best Fiend documentary, where there was fog on one side of the mountain, and then it stopped at one point, and you see this path of all these people kind of coming down the mountain and coming up towards the camera. It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. But then they go from that into more shots of these people kind of traipsing through the jungle. And at first when I see these people, I'm just like, this does not look real to me. This looks like I don't know, not a high school production, but it rang really false to see these people in this kind of, period costume and all this. And I just had this real kind of bad taste in my mouth. For some reason, just the way that the film stock looked or something, I was just like, yeah, this really isn't doing it for me. Cut to me 5 minutes later, they're still going through the jungle, and they're trying to get this cannon through this big puddle of mud or whatever, and they're like, make sure that the mouth of the cannon doesn't go in the water. And I'm sitting there watching this in a completely different state of mind, just like, oh, yeah, you can't get that cannon in the water. That would be really bad. And, boy, I hope these people make it through this, this part of the jungle okay. All of a sudden, I'm with them in that historical moment and thinking that I'm watching something very realistic. And almost to your point, it feels like a documentary now, like everything is kind of shifted. And I don't know where that shift took place for me inside of my head, but it definitely did. And I suddenly found myself with you watching this documentary, quote unquote, of these people. The reality had left it, and or had entered it, I suppose. And I'm just really invested in these characters. And it's just like, how did that happen? Because like I said, that second shot of the film just looks so fakey to me. But then 5 minutes later, I'm all in. The chips are in the center of the table. I'm ready to see the whole thing.
I completely agree. Thinking back to the beginning of the film, it doesn't have the same feel that the rest of the film does. And I don't know if that's maybe Herzog trying to ease you into the Amazonian jungle. It doesn't do a very good job of doing that if that's what he's going for. But Yeah, you're right. It just kind of happens. And I was thinking the same thing about, thinking about some of the other feature-length films we watched. The same thing kind of happens in Straussic, where at the beginning of the film, it's taking kind of place all in Berlin, and it feels very movie. It feels very much like a film, like a movie. It doesn't feel like a documentary. And then as soon as they get to Wisconsin, all of a sudden it feels like a documentary. And you're just like, this is not a movie anymore.
Right.
This is him following real people. And to some extent, a lot of the people that are in Straussic aren't actors anyways. But you get this feeling, this overwhelming feeling that this is a documentary, not a film.
Right, which is, I think, where his power really lays. And I can see why he is such an effective documentary filmmaker. And even when it came to Aguirre, just the use of the diary, setting it up with that opening scroll and talking about how they found this diary of one of the people. And, it's all made up for the film, I believe, but they play it off so well that it really feels like there is a diary, and it really feels like this did take place, and this whole thing is right there. And the way that they reference other historical figures, he's talking about Pizarro, and he's talking about Cortez, and just the way that, they really play off of the idea of these noble people traipsing through the jungle with their, hundreds of slaves and everything. And that use of the voiceover from the one monk, I thought was super effective and really, like I said, cemented me into that story.
I'm actually really glad you brought up Apocalypse Now, because I'm assuming you feel the same way, about this film and Apocalypse Now. They're kind of in the same vein. Apocalypse Now was influenced to some extent by Aguirre, or the other way around?
Well, it's got to be the first way, because this was 72, and Apocalypse Now, even though the screenplay had been written in 69, really didn't start production completely until 75, 76.
Right. So you
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface-level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind-the-scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
Get that? It's that same kind of going down the river.
Yeah, the tagline that I'm reading on IMDb is a breathtaking journey into the heart of darkness. So yeah, right. we're there. We're in Joseph Conrad territory, definitely.
Yeah. And the character of Aguirre is kind of a mirror image of Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. I mean, they're the same kind of, they're going crazy, and they're, egomaniacs, and they're trying to control everyone around them, and they're scheming. But it's such an interesting subject matter, and it's kind of a timeless story because it doesn't really, you could set this at any point in history, really. People going down the river, and obviously with Apocalypse Now, it takes place in Vietnam. This film takes place in the 1500s. But the kind of the timelessness of the story that they're telling, I think, adds to the feel of the film, if that makes sense, because you're able to connect with the characters more than if it were telling kind of the story of Cobra Verde. Cobra Verde still has a lot of timelessness to it because it's talking about race and, the treatment of races by other races. But I think Aguirre has kind of a more timeless quality to it because of the themes that it's touching on, like, going insane, being an egomaniac, and kind of just pushing yourself to the limit and losing yourself in the process.
Well, it's like Apocalypse Now if Kurtz was on the boat with Willard instead of being the person at the end of the journey. Right. And I appreciate that whole idea of, because like I was saying earlier, he's kind of in the background when we first start off. And especially, like that opening shot where we have all of the people in the party and nobody gets preferential treatment when it comes to all of these people that we're seeing coming towards the camera here. And everybody is treated as these are characters in this story that you're going to see. We don't know if we're going to focus on one of the, native slaves, or if we're going to focus on the woman in the that's being carried in the palanquin. We don't know if we're going to focus on the monk or who it's going to be. So it's nice that he's just there. And if you didn't know who Klaus Kinski was when you go in and first see this movie, you'd be kind of surprised, because he's just kind of one of the background players at first. And then and he's, even when they say, like, okay, we're going to break up the group, and this person's going to do this, and this person's going to do that, he's not put in command. He's second in command. And so it's interesting that it's kind of his journey to being in command, and the way that he takes over things, the way that he takes command of the situation. But he's not in the forefront for the longest time in the film, and I really appreciate that he kind of moves from the shadows into the light.
And I do appreciate, though, it did make me chuckle at the beginning of the film, that Klaus Kinski is the only blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy in the entire jungle with them. I mean, it's kind of that thing now, where you have like a Broadway play like Hamilton, where it's like, it's a mixing of American cultures, so you suspend your disbelief because it doesn't really matter. This movie was kind of doing the same thing, where it's like, Aguirre was not a German guy, and he stands out like a sore thumb, and if his performance weren't as good as it is, most people would be like, this is fucking dumb. In this day and age, doing that, you'd have an uproar, whitewashing the movie, and, they're not casting a Hispanic actor to play Aguirre. What the fuck are you doing? But he's absolutely so fantastic in this movie. You forget that he's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German with a bunch of what are supposed to be Spaniards in the middle of the Amazonian jungle. You almost forget about it instantly.
Well, it is interesting going back to the whole language thing, because as I'm watching it, and I'm watching it in a German language, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know how many of these natives down in South America would be speaking German. But then I'm like, okay, well, if they were speaking Spanish, I'm sure by this point in their culture, there are some people who know Spanish and other people that don't. But yeah, I was like, this is really weird that all these Spaniards are down here speaking German. I don't know if, having seen the English version, if I would have thought that, if it would have just been natural for me to be like, oh yeah, we're watching this movie, and yeah, it's okay that these people speak English and not Spanish, but seeing them speaking German and not Spanish kind of struck me as funny the first few minutes in, but then I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just accept this because it's a German production, so it's all right.
Speaking of Klaus Kinski, what do you think of his performance in the film?
I think it was great. Like I said, I like that he isn't seething and, your eye is drawn to him just because you know it's Kinski and just because you know that he's a great actor. So my eye kept going to him, but he doesn't necessarily command that at all times. He isn't saying like, hey, look at me over here, but my eye is drawn to him. But when he finally starts to become the wrath of God, he owns the whole film after that. And it was just wonderful seeing that. And those moments where he breaks the fourth wall and looks right in the camera, like when he announces that he is the wrath of God, your heart just skips a beat, or at least mine did. I was just like, wow, this is fantastic. This guy he's penetrating my soul with those eyes, those beautiful blue eyes of his, and that crazy mouth and everything. Just, he has such a great look about him that I just wanted to stare at him all day long.
Yeah, he really is kind of his character and his performance. He's kind of he's the star of the film, but he's also like the black hole that drags everybody else down with him. In the film, because he's the driving factor behind them kind of going off on their own away from Pizarro and everyone kind of beginning to starve and go crazy to the point where they're getting shot with arrows and they're like, this isn't real. Yes. This isn't happening. Like, there's like a fucking guy with like an arrow sticking out of his chest. He's like, what? This isn't real. Like, oh my God. Like you said, he at the end of the film, I think what I would say is one of the most notable scenes in the film, he's, like you said, he breaks the fourth wall and he's staring at the camera, and he has this really striking monologue to the camera where he's talking about marrying his own daughter.
Who is dead by that point, so that's even more fantastic.
Right. All the while where there's like monkeys jumping around on the raft, and he's like, I'm going to make this continent the purest, with the purest dynasty, and will rule the entire continent. And he's got like a little tiny monkey in his hand, and he's like, I am the wrath of God. And he fucking throws the monkey in the water. Who else is with me? And his performance in this film, like you said, he's not the Cobra Verde Kinski where he's just like completely unhinged, and he's, just in that film.
Hello, filthy movie lovers. My name is Gentry Austin.
And I'm Casey Scott.
And we're the hosts of the Sin Syndicate, film podcast for something weirdos, anti-criterion bros, and Joseph Sarno aficionados. Join us semi-weekly as we peer into the adults-only theaters and sticky-floored cinemas of the golden age of sexploitation, when the morals were loose, the laws were murky, and the intercourse was all simulated. Find us now on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
I think he's a little bit kind of over the top versus this film. His performance in this film, it just, you don't get performances like this from actors anymore. I mean, they don't make films like this anymore either. And when they do, it's The Revenant, and people sit in their, jaw aghast for hours because of how crazy this movie is. When there have been people doing this since the 70s and before that, and people are just like, oh my God, he ate a ox heart. Holy shit, that's insane.
I totally was thinking of The Revenant as I was watching this movie. Like, there were moments where I was just like, wow, they really took a lot from Aguirre. Watching that film, I was just like, something about that kind of documentary realness and stuff. I just kept thinking of Aguirre, and I kept thinking, like, my God, Kinski, it's like, yes, Tom Hardy is a fantastic actor and everything, but I was just like, wow, Aguirre is so much more evil than the Tom Hardy character could ever think of to be in The Revenant, and just, he was fantastic for it.
I think that, Inarritu should really, I think that he would cite Herzog as a influence, and if he isn't, he's kidding himself. Because, I mean, even Fitzcarraldo kind of has that same dirty, dingy, in the Amazon, real feel to it. Honestly, The Revenant felt super, like, compared to this film, The Revenant felt super produced.
Yes.
And fake. No matter how much natural lighting you use to light your set, you cannot capture in this day and age, unless you really are going out into the shit and making it, you can't capture what Herzog captured in Aguirre or Fitzcarraldo.
Yeah, I don't see Herzog using, digital buffalo or reindeer or whatever that was, so that's how memorable that movie is, because I'm just like, I don't remember what he ate or what that herd was, but it just seemed very fake when I saw it.
Yeah, it's, Aguirre was doing Inarritu before Inarritu was even making film. I mean,
right.
That's, he was making these films that, they do feel real, and it feels like you're watching, like you said, you feel like you're watching reality. And that, I think that that's just such a lost art in film. And maybe it's not really an art, maybe it's just something that a director every generation can tap into. But I miss the films like this one and other of the Herzog feature-length films. I really miss that about film, where it's not like a, found footage where it's pretending to be real. It's a film that, because of the way it's shot, it feels real. And I can't really think of any other films recently that even begin to kind of edge towards what Herzog was able to do with his films in the 70s and 80s.
You mean not like The Following or anything? Wasn't that real?
The Following? You're talking about The Witch? I mean, like, The Following.
That one that's about sex sexually transmitted diseases that the director says it's not about sexually transmitted diseases.
Oh, it follows.
It follows. Oh, my bad.
Oh, you mean, don't open that box. I was disappointed by that movie, and I know I'm like the very, 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 very minority of people who was disappointed by that movie. Maybe the film The Witch kind of edges towards what Aguirre was kind of going for and captured. Kind of that this feels real, set in the period, but you feel like you're watching it for real, not just a film. Kind of as we're ending Herzog month, I'm curious for you, Mike, because I'm assuming you've watched a fair amount of Herzog films. Of his documentaries and his feature-length films, which ones are your favorites? Or would you suggest to someone who's, not a huge Herzog fan or has never seen any Herzog films before?
Well, I think that, you've mentioned Grizzly Man kind of as a joke a couple times during this episode, but I would say that that's definitely one of the easiest films of his to get into. And even
if the subject matter is horrifying.
Completely horrifying. But I'll tell you, it stays with you. Definitely. Yeah, all these years later, you can still think of him telling that the sister not to watch that tape.
And crying.
Yeah.
And Herzog crying, though you don't get to see it.
What an amazing thing that he would not show it. And I think that restraint is what separates him from other filmmakers sometimes.
Yeah, we had this conversation when we talked Grizzly Man about how I was convinced, and I'm still convinced, that scene is kind of the linchpin of the film.
Yes.
Okay, so you agree with me to some extent.
It's the one that my brain goes back to the most.
Right, because you get the sense that he is not trying to exploit Timothy Treadwell.
Right.
In the film. He's trying to respect who he was as a person, but at the same time, what happened to him and the way that he shot his footage, it ends up feeling exploitative because you know how this ends. Mm-hmm. And he's with these bears, and one of these bears is eventually going to eat him. So it kind of feels kind of like a little exploitative, not like in a Faces of Death kind of way, but in kind of like we know where this is going, and it's kind of hard to watch. But yeah, that scene, I mean, you're right. If he had put that audio on the film, I mean, this absolutely would have been deplorable. Oh, but yeah. I mean, that's really what separates Herzog from everybody else. Because I don't know if a lot of other directors would have shown that kind of restraint.
Yeah, it seems like they would have even shown you the beginning of it before the mauling takes place.
Yeah. What about feature-length Herzog films? Is there anyone that you particularly enjoy?
I really did like Port of Call, New Orleans. I could see where people don't, but I really enjoyed that one. I watched it a couple times. We did an episode on it probably about a year or so ago, and watched that and the other Bad Lieutenant. And I thought it was very audacious that he would do this kind of second chapter of a different Bad Lieutenant. And I thought that was pretty neat. I find him very interesting that he can take his own work or take other people's work and kind of add on it, like taking Little Dieter Needs to Fly and making Rescue Dawn out of it. I thought was terrific. I would say that if you've not seen Herzog before, the Aguirre is a great place to start, but I would say you could even go farther back and watch Even Dwarfs Started Small. I mean, that movie is just all kinds of messed up, but I enjoy it regardless.
What about Herzog Eats a Shoe? Oh my God, that one just cracks me up. Herzog Eats a Shoe.
Well, he didn't direct that one though, did he?
No, but it's Herzog eating a shoe.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember who directed it.
I can't remember if that was Les Blanc or who that was.
I always the story behind it always cracks me up. They made this bet and Herzog had to eat it was Les Blanc. Herzog has to eat his own shoe. Because Errol Morris completed Gates of Heaven. So it's like it's him filming him eating his shoe. God, Herzog, he's an interesting guy. He's a very interesting guy. And, I was disappointed that we didn't get to talk to him this month. Because from everything I've heard, he seems like he's fairly outgoing to speak to people interested in his films. But he's in Indonesia right now. So, And when I spoke with Zach Penn last month when we talked about, or actually in March when we talked about Incident at Loch Ness, which is a fantastic Herzog film, even though it's not a Herzog film.
Right.
He said that he had just spoken with Werner Herzog and he just got back from filming volcanoes in North Korea, which is just like that sounds so fucking Herzogian and just like a thing. Oh, yeah, of course he's doing that. Of course he's in North Korea filming volcanoes. Why wouldn't he be? It's that, that you just get this. Anytime you watch a Herzog film, like I said, the auteur nature of him comes through. You know it's a Herzog film.
Right.
And there aren't a whole lot of directors like that anymore. Everybody just kind of, I don't know, they just kind of clump into one mold. I don't know, maybe I'm being too pessimistic on film. It's just Herzog does to me.
I'm sure as you've talked about Herzog over the months, you've talked about just how hypnotic his voice is.
His voice is fantastic. I mean, that's the reason he's been on, cartoons like Metalocalypse and Rick and Morty recently, because they're just like, we want your voice. Like, please, like, let us have your voice for the show, even if it's in just like a goofy bit part.
Yeah, it is so great. And his voice helps his own films so much. I mean, just, what was that one that he made, not Lessons in Darkness, the one, The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. That one was just wonderful to hear him narrate that story. And just, I could listen to him for hours.
And, I feel like I've seen a good amount of his fictional feature-length films. I haven't seen a whole lot of his documentaries, other than Grizzly Man and I guess just Grizzly Man and Into the Abyss, which I really enjoyed. I don't know if you've seen Into the Abyss or not, but that movie that's a bummer of a movie. I don't know how many of Herzog's films aren't bummers, but that film is a particularly dark film.
I haven't seen that one yet. What is the gist of that?
It's Herzog interviewing 3 gentlemen who are all one of them is on death row and is soon to be executed.
Oh wow.
I think it was produced by Investigation Discovery. It's a very, very somber and kind of a little on the morbid, exploitative side of subject matter. It's actually on Netflix. And the other thing, I always remember Herzog from Jack Reacher.
Yes.
As the villain, as the villain who bit his own fingers off to survive, which always cracks me up because that's just, oh, well, of course, Herzog's playing a villain who bit his own fingers off so that he didn't die. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to, lo and behold, Reveries of the Connected World. They're showing that at a film festival in Ann Arbor over the next couple of weeks. I'm excited to see that one, which is his internet documentary.
Yeah, I've heard. It looks interesting. I haven't heard anything about it, but is it supposed to be good?
From what I understand, but it's one of those things where it's like bad Herzog is better than good insert director here. Yes,
good mostly anybody. And that's his first documentary since 2011, since he made Into the Abyss. So that'll be good. Yeah, as long as he's narrating it.
Yeah.
If he's narrating it, I'm sold. I could hear him, I don't know, read the phone book or, read IKEA instructions. Well, I couldn't do that, but, and then you put the square into the hole and it's life is pain. That's kind of Herzog for you. Skip it or watch it, and best performance, but you can't say Klaus Kinski because I think that's a gimme.
That's a cop-out, yeah.
Yeah, that's a total gimme.
Definitely watch it, and I would say best performance that isn't Klaus Kinski is, I'm trying to remember the woman's name, the noble woman that is not his daughter.
Helena Rojo?
I believe you're correct.
As Inez?
Inez, si.
Yes. I feel like we didn't really talk about anyone else in the movie, but everyone else is kind of really, after Klaus Kinski's character of Aguirre kind of comes to the forefront, everyone else is kind of downplayed. And they're just kind of supporting to his just kind of rampant insanity. And they're all kind of just going mad by proxy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about, pieces in some madman's chess game when we talk about Under Siege in a couple weeks here, but...
Dear God. I'm just a cook, Mike. Actually, it's more like, I'm just a cook. I'm just a cook. I'm just a cook.
But definitely, everybody seems to be chess pieces in Aguirre's game, and they are, at the end of the day, they're somewhat inconsequential to his plan.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, which segues into my, obviously it's a watch. My pick for best performance of the film is Peter Burling as Don Fernando de Guzman, who plays the fat guy who becomes emperor of the boat, more or less, of the land, but it's the boat, and he gets choked out. I'm assuming he gets choked out by Aguirre. They don't say it outright, but he just is miraculously strangled. And Aguirre is his second in command. So, he's an interesting kind of counterpoint to Aguirre. He's just kind of a fat guy who eats a lot. And he's a fat guy who eats a lot and doesn't really do a lot in the movie. He's kind of the guy who is going to disappear in some form or fashion so that Aguirre could become the leader of the band of merry idiots as they head down the river to their eventual demise, including seeing a boat in a tree, which a very striking visual, to say the least.
It seems to really kind of presage Fitzcarraldo.
Yeah, it really does.
I would say that fat guy, he plays the perfect figurehead type character, where it's like, okay, here we go. You're not the power, you're the throne, but you're not the power behind the throne. And then after a while, Aguirre just kind of gets tired of being the power behind and wants to take on the whole thing.
Yeah, one of the best scenes with his character is when Aguirre gets mad that they're not going to execute that guy.
Right.
Because he's like, I grant him clemency. And Aguirre's like, fuck this shit, fucking done. He stomps off and he's so angry. It's like, man, it's like, this guy's got something coming to him. He just doesn't realize it yet. Yeah. What do you think the film has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Well, I'm trying to think. Rotten Tomatoes tends to be critics that are doing this, right? The
tomato meter is, the audience score is, film goers.
Okay.
Not the critics. Yes.
Audience score, I would say 78. And critics, I would say probably more like 85 or 90.
Tomato meter score out of 43 reviews, 98%.
Wow.
Audience score out of 23,000 reviews, 91%.
Wow. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I thought that the public wouldn't be able to handle it.
I'll say this much. I'm assuming the people who watch this film know what they're getting into.
Okay.
I don't think they're happening on this film by accident. You know what I mean? That's what I feel like, at least. I feel like if you're watching this film, you're kind of going out of your way to watch it. So.
Fair enough.
Well, before I talk about this Thursday's Kulturecast, Mike, what are you guys up to over at the Projection Booth podcast? What can we expect from you guys here in the next couple of weeks?
Well, other than some of the stuff I talked about at the beginning of the show, let's see. Really, I kind of touched on a lot of it. We've got Apocalypse Now coming out on the 8th of June. Some call it Loving Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, and then having you back on the show with Celine and Julie go boating.
And I always have a good time when I guest on your podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, always glad to have you.
And I think this will be the first time I'm on the Projection Booth podcast that I've never seen the movie that we're talking about. So
I'm curious to get your reaction. You know it's over 3 hours long, right?
I didn't know that, but I know that now.
Okay.
I will make sure to set aside a Saturday afternoon to watch it. I have not watched it yet, so it's over 3 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I was looking around for other supporting material. There's also another film that I need to send you called Surreal Estate, which kind of plays well with it. And it has the writer of the film is the writer-director of Surreal Estate. But when I'm out looking for other supporting material and I type in Celine and Julie, managed to find a nice porn clip. Apparently two young ladies, one named Celine and one named Julie. And it's definitely a different take on the subject matter. Let's just put it that way.
They are looking for the little man in the boat.
Yes.
Is what they're looking for.
Yes.
They're going boating a very different kind of boating. I don't know if water sports would be involved in that scenario, but
fortunately, it wasn't.
I'm interested to find out. I'm open to the experience. Let's put it out. Jesus. I'm looking forward to being on the podcast, and you're going to be on a Kulturecast here in about 2 weeks, where we talk, like you said, about the Steven Seagal, Tommy Lee Jones classic, Under Siege. I think I can say it's a classic. I mean, it holds up pretty well. Yeah. 20 plus years later. 20 years? Yeah. Came out in 92?
Yeah.
20 plus years later, yeah.
So, I had the big 25th anniversary next year, is that right?
Yeah, 25 years of Gary Busey dancing around in a dress. Jesus Christ.
I can't wait to talk about that movie.
It's Die Hard on a boat. Like, fuck. With more breasts. I mean, that's, Erica Eleniak. There you go. Like, the one scene of breasts, I was like, paused. All right, I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. I'm done for the rest of the day. You can follow me on Twitter at CultureStash. And if you like what you're hearing now, head on over to cultureshock.com/Kulturecast and listen to 100 plus episodes of the Kulturecast. If you like listening to Mike and I talk, some episodes that stick out in my mind that Mike has been on, we talked about Casino Royale and the underrated classic that is Quantum of Solace in January. And we also talked about the entire Hannibal Lecter franchise last year. The Mummy as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
don't forget Constantine and Dylan Dog.
That's right. Dylan Dog, Dead of Night. Jesus. Oh, I've tried to forget it. And I want to say the first one that you were on was 2012.
Oh, yeah. It's a disaster. Definitely.
Yeah. It was a fucking disaster. John Cusack is actually going to be at the Dallas Comic Book Convention next weekend. I was so tempted to buy a ticket to meet him and get his autograph and be like, can you please sign it with a quote from 2012?
Oh, wow.
Just like, not like, even though he's in one of my favorite movies of all time, High Fidelity, I'd be like a total dickhead and just be like, can you sign it as your character from the hit film 2012? Just be that fucking asshole. Oh, God. This Thursday, speaking of 2012 and global disaster films, this Thursday we're going to be talking about X-Men Apocalypse, and we're going to be joined by a cavalcade of writers from Culture Shocked. John Leon and Ash Suri will be joining me, along with my co-host Sean. He'll be returning to sit down and talk the 2.5-hour epic that is X-Men Apocalypse. Big thanks, as always, to Wavoka for the intro-outro music for the podcast. That song you hear in the intro-outro is their song off their titled debut album, Lament. And if you want to kick a couple dollars our way, head on over to patreon.com/culture_shocked and help us out. Every little bit counts. And big thanks to you, Mike, for sitting down and co-hosting the Kulturecast with me and talking Aguirre.
Pleasure to be here, as always, sir.
And I can guarantee that next month when we talk Under Siege, we won't be nearly as astute about what we're talking about. It's going to be, oh my God. Did you like that one scene with the boobs? Yeah, me too. Cool. I like Steven Seagal.
Well, it's not going to be just the one performance, you know. It's like taking 3 Kinskis and putting them into one film between Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Busey, and Steven Seagal. So that'd be fantastic.
Steven Seagal, absolute just... We'll save that discussion for the podcast for Under Siege. So yeah, make sure to check out this Thursday's Kulturecast.